Mbarara City FC are a small club from Uganda. I've been sent their jersey by Sangalo, along with a challenge. Tom, we want you to win Mbarara the African Champions League, but you can only use players from Uganda. The issue is, only twice have clubs from Uganda reached the African Champions League final, and both times they lost. And then there's the fact that Mbarara have never won the Ugandan Premier League either. So we're going to have to break a lot of records to complete this challenge. There are 16 teams in the Ugandan Premier League, but only the champions get to go to the Champions League. We have two great strikers in Latif Senkabuj and Paul Basolo, but we need them both scoring if we want to be crowned champions. We don't have many wide players at the club, so we're going for a narrow 4-3-1-2 formation to penetrate through the middle. But on the opening day of the season, we lost 2-0 to the reigning champions of Uganda, Vipers Sports Club. Fortunately, we did start winning as Basola helped us to a 2-0 win against Busoga United, and Senkabuj scored in a 4-0 victory against the Network Company FC. There'll be no singing in the streets of the Network Company tonight. Or Mbarara, really. Because we just couldn't keep a good bit of form going. For every match we won, we'd lose 2 in a row, and we just weren't able to make any progress in the league. As a result, at the halfway point, we sit 8th in the table in total no man's land. Luckily for us though, things did improve in the second half of the season, as we got revenge on Vipers by thrashing them 7-2 at home, with Basolo scoring a hat-trick and Senkabuj getting a brace. In fact, our form was totally turned around, winning 11 of 15 games in the second half of the season, thanks to the players finally getting used to our formation. The issue was, it was just too little, too late. We finish off the campaign in 6th place, 14 points away from the title. And this leaves me with a big dilemma. Do we stick with the 4-3-1-2 formation because Basolo and Senkabuj have scored 41 goals between them this season, or do we switch to wingers? Because we've had a couple of decent players come through our youth intake and we could look to bring in some other wide players in summer. But I think what we have to be doing is looking to prioritise our youth academy. Because Mbarara FC were actually founded as Citizens FC in 2010 by a high school called Citizens High School. The idea was the school team would help local young talent thrive and develop as footballers. Only it turned out they were way too good for the local leagues and started to rise up the football pyramid. In 2016, they earned promotion to the Ugandan Premier League, and as a result, they changed their name to Mbarara City to represent the entire city rather than just the school. So it's a real miracle that this team have done so well, and this is where we can help them. I was sent their jersey by Sangalo, who manufacture and distribute kits of unique clubs from around the world. This means their shirts can have really cool, unique designs. For example, this shirt features local textile patterns to represent the area, as well as the lion on the back of the neck. Because Sangalo works so closely with clubs they partner with, it's a great way for a shirt collector to get interesting and unique kits, but it also makes a real tangible difference to the clubs, helping them invest for the future and reach their goals. Sangalo have loads of partnerships, so head to their website linked in the description to find a shirt and story you love, and better still, they have a fantastic sale on right now. With the more shirts you buy, the more money you save. So because of this, I have decided to compromise. We're going for a 4-4-2, so we can keep our two strikers firing in goals, but also focus on developing our youngsters in the wide positions. This is actually one of your formations. I've stolen it from Toma. He submitted a save file to me to review in a video that we did a few weeks ago, and it was a very good save, so I thought I'm going to steal your tactic. If it doesn't work, it's not my fault. But thankfully, it certainly did work, as on the opening day of the season, we beat Wakaso Giants 9-2, with 5 of the goals being scored by Robert Kigundu, who came through our youth intake. If that's what the 16-year-old can do, we might need to think about starting him every game. So we did. And he kept scoring, even if we did end up losing some of the games as the team was getting used to the 4-4-2. Despite this, Kigundu kept scoring goals and kept winning us plenty of games in the first half of the season. As a result, we find ourselves second in the table, 3 points behind Ondu Paraka, who beat us 3-1 earlier in the season. So in the second half of the season, we were locked into a tight battle with the Green Caterpillars. Yes, that is their nickname, and they have a big green caterpillar on their logo. I'll be honest, I low-key love it. I think it's really cool. Both sides kept winning games as we extended our lead ahead of the rest of the pack. But when it came to the return fixture, we knew we had to beat them. And after a goalless first half, we scored 5 times in the second half to earn ourselves all 3 points and finally get on top of the table with 5 games to go. With the title race in our hands, we beat Ugandan People's Defence Force 3-1, Gaddafi 4-1, and Arua Hill Sports Club 4-1. But disaster struck when we could have won the title against already relegated Blacks Power, but we lost 2-0. So it means the title is going down to the final day of the season. And we had the perfect opportunity to get an early lead when the referee awarded us a penalty 16 minutes into the game, which we coolly slotted away to make it 1-0. Then just 3 minutes later, the wonder kid Robert Kigundu scored from a corner to extend our lead. But we can't get complacent as Express FC pulled one back. Luckily for us though, it was disallowed for offside. So we need to focus up in the second half and get the job done, which is exactly what we did. We won the ball in the midfield and got it up the pitch quickly, getting it to the byline and then crossing it into Kigundu, who scored our third, which was needed because Express FC managed to pull one back 5 minutes later. But we held our own for the rest of the game and emerged victorious to lift the Ugandan Premier League title above our heads and qualify for the CAF Champions League in the process. I guess we should also be saying thanks to Toma, this would not have been possible without his 4-4-2. So in Season 3, we've been drawn against Al Nassr Benghazi from Libya in the Champions League preliminary rounds. A team of Ugandan players might be good enough to win the Ugandan Premier League, but the Champions League is a totally different ballgame. So I got busy and spent £13,000 on new players. Big money moves for the Ugandan Premier Division. Ashraf Mandela is hopefully going to get up and down the right wing to help support the attacks, whilst Faisal Wabuna is perhaps on paper the best player at the club right now and will be the heartbeat of our midfield. So I'm feeling good about this team. The only issue is the Champions League preliminary rounds are before we play any pre-season friendlies. So as you would expect, lacking match sharpness, we didn't do very well in Libya, as Al Nassr Benghazi scored 3 times in the first half to take a commanding lead into the break. But after a rousing team talk, Robert Kigundu got us a goal back on the hour mark. And then 5 minutes later, his strike partner Latif Senkabouj scored our second of the game, before he added a third goal to our haul, meaning we felt the comeback was totally on and we should go to win the match. Until Benghazi scored a fourth with 15 minutes to go and won them the first leg 4-3. But that scoreline is not impossible to turn around. But it was a false sense of optimism, as back in Uganda we suffered a heavy 5-2 defeat to get knocked out at the first hurdle. Winning the Champions League is going to be so tough. Fortunately, the extra firepower we signed over summer massively helped when it came to the league, as we ran away with it early in the season. Once again, it was Kigundu and Senkabouj leading the way with goals, and both scored in a 3-2 victory against Onduparaka. This time we have an 8-point lead over them at the halfway stage of the season. And it was much the same in the second half of the season, with the 4-4-2 working really well with the players we have, as we dominated virtually everyone in the league. But we have the emergence of a new striker in the squad, as David Onyango scored a couple of goals towards the end of the season. David came through this season's youth intake and looks solid for 16 years old. In fact, we had quite a few good players come through this season, so I think to maximise their potential, we need to use them all in the first team next season, at least when we're not playing in the Champions League, which we have qualified for again by finishing top of the table, 17 points clear of our nearest rivals. So I'm taking a risk in Season 4 by releasing a lot of the squad players with expiring contracts to ensure our youth players make up the bulk of the bench and get good game time to develop. And I also focused on signing youngsters like Dennis Mayanja from Basongo United to develop for the future. This season, we've been drawn against Zambia's Zesco United in the Champions League, but frustratingly, we conceded 3 minutes into the match. Luckily though, we didn't let our heads drop, as we scored just a minute later to get back on level terms, and our spirits were lifted even higher when Zesco had a man sent off just 11 minutes into the game, meaning it's now surely ours for the taking. It certainly looked that way when we took the lead half an hour in through Latif Senkabouj, and I felt we're on our way to victory, until we conceded twice either side of half time, as Marcel Zimba scored 2 super goals. But we were able to once again draw level, as Senkabouj scored an hour into the match. But in the 94th minute, Zesco scored a 4th. Frustratingly, we could only draw the second leg 0-0, So once again, we're knocked out at the first hurdle. But this has given me an idea. This season, I'm going to play our youngsters week in, week out, come what may, to make sure they have the best chance possible to develop into really good players for next season. Obviously, it came with some teething issues though, as we ended up losing games to the likes of Express FC and Bright Stars, both sides we were comfortably beating last season. But to my surprise, we were still winning a majority of our games, and our youngsters were all developing nicely. At the halfway mark of the season, we're top of the table, only 5 points off our tally from this point last season. But in the second half of the season, this is where things started to falter. We lost games to Kampala, Ondu Paraka, Vipers, Wakiso Giants and Bright Stars, where obviously our former player Basolo scored a hat-trick for them after we let him go to focus on playing our youth prospects. Thankfully, when we did win, we won by some big scorelines, which made a huge impact to our goal difference, which we really needed to rely on, because we only managed to just win the title on goal difference. So it was a massive gamble playing the youth this season, but they have developed nicely, and we've just qualified for next season's Champions League. If we can get through next season's preliminary rounds, then surely it's all been worth it. But we've been drawn against Pyramids from Egypt, one of the best clubs in Africa. We've made 3 good signings over summer, but I don't think even they could help us beat Pyramids just yet. And to make matters worse, 5 of our starters were on international duty with Uganda for the Africa Championship of Nations qualifying games. So we felt like we were lambs off for slaughter when Pyramids opened the scoring in Uganda. But then, David Onyango managed to pull one back just before the halftime break. But there was still enough time in the half for Pyramids to regain the lead. But early in the second half, we managed to score another goal to earn ourselves a famous draw. And when we travelled to Cairo and scored first, we thought we pulled off a miracle. But sadly, we hadn't. In the second half, Pyramids came back and scored twice to beat us 4-3 on aggregate and once again knock us out of the Champions League. So once again, we battled through the season, but this time around, our youth players were much better, and as a result, things were much smoother. Once again, Robert Kigundu scored more goals than games played, taking his tally to 129 league goals in 115 league games played. David Onyango is also getting up there in numbers. The 18-year-old scored 21 times across the season and forms a lethal front two with Kigundu. But it's Aziz Maloume, a young left midfielder that we signed over summer, that's made a massive difference, as he also scored 21 goals this season from the wing. As a result, we end up winning the title comfortably this season, but we have to make all our progress count in the Champions League. However, just like last season, we're up against one of Africa's best teams in ASEC Mimosas from Ivory Coast. They made the quarterfinals last season, where they lost to the eventual winners. But in the first leg, Latif Senkabouche scored 2 minutes in to give us the lead. But late in the second half, the referee awarded Mimosas a penalty, which they went on to score, drawing the first leg 1-1. Then they took the lead in the second leg, and it felt like a familiar story was unravelling. Until 35 minutes in, Mimosas had a man sent off, giving us a golden opportunity, which we took as David Onyango scored to level things up. But despite being down to 10 men, Mimosas scored from a corner early in the second half. Just 5 minutes later though, Senkabouche was able to once again pull us back on level terms, and from here, we turned the screw, eventually firing in a third goal on the night to win 4-3 on aggregate and finally get past the preliminary round. This gives us the chance to get revenge over Pyramids FC in the first round of the Champions League. Once again, we took an early lead in the first leg, this time through Robert Kigundu. Unlike Mimosas though, we conceded another, meaning we lost the first leg 2-1 and are on the verge of elimination. The Egyptians then scored the first in the second leg before we equalised in the 4th minute of added time at the end of the first half. But what happened in the second half was pure magic. Somehow, we scored 7 times in the second leg. Pyramids themselves actually scored twice, but it means we progressed to the group stage as 9-5 winners on aggregates. But in the group stage, we've been drawn against Agosto from Angola, Orlando Pirates from South Africa, and TP Mazembe from Democratic Republic of Congo. And we started well, as we earned ourselves a 2-2 draw away at Agosto in Angola. But we shone as we welcomed the 5-time Champions League winners TP Mazembe to Uganda and beat them 6-2 with Robert Kigundu scoring himself a hat-trick. Sadly though, we couldn't do the same against Orlando Pirates, who we drew 2-2 with. But a 2-1 loss to Agosto at home reduced our chances of making the quarterfinals, and it means we now have to avoid defeat to Orlando Pirates to progress. But instead, we suffered a 6-1 defeat in South Africa, knocking us out of the Champions League on goal difference. But this shows that we can mix it up with the big boys in Africa. And we're going to have another shot next season as we've once again won the league title. So I spent £50,000 on new players, including a guy who was based in Scotland. Elvis Buomono is probably on paper the best player at the club right now, following his move from Dunfermline. In the Champions League, we're up against Djibouti's AS Arta in the prelim round. And it turns out this was the easiest tie we've had in our Champions League campaign, as we won 5-0 at home and 5-1 away. This sets us up against Al Ittihad Tripoli, and at our place, we won the first leg 5-2, as we had 5 different players on the score sheets. But we can't get complacent, as we lost the second leg 2-1. We still progress as 6-4 winners on aggregate, but it shows we aren't invincible. Especially when we've been drawn against arguably the best team in Africa, Wydad Casablanca, Ghana's Asante Kotoko, who have 2 Champions League wins, and Cameroon's Cotton Sports. To my surprise, we actually beat Asante Kotoko at home 2-1, but we ended up losing our other 5 games, and they weren't particularly close either. So it shows we had a super long way to go as we finish rock bottom of the group. Every step forward we take, it just feels like we then take 2 steps back. I don't know when we're going to finish this challenge because I'm not feeling too confident. Thankfully, we get another shot at the Champions League next season, as obviously we have once again dominated the Ugandan Premier League. But we are running out of Ugandan talent. There's only so many players that we can sign to the club. The very best is Isaac Mugabe, who plays for Strasbourg and is obviously out of our price range. We could afford John Dembe, who plays in Sweden, but he doesn't want to join us. So instead, we signed 6 players who all play for the Ugandan national team in a bid to really strengthen our squad, including £75,000 on Steven Sawada from Miami FC, who will slot into the midfield. But will this team be good enough to get through the group stage? Well, we're going to find out as we take on Cotton Sports in the preliminary round, who beat us twice last season in the group stage. David Onyango's goal was enough for us to seal a 1-0 victory at home, whilst a 2-2 draw in Cameroon sees us progress as 3-2 winners on aggregate. This feels like a very good sign. In the first round, we have Sudan's Al Merrikh, and at home, we put 3 goals past them to set ourselves up nicely for the second leg. All we have to do is make sure we don't bottle it. But Al Merrikh scored first in Sudan, and I started to get worried. But thankfully, we managed to equalise and draw the game 1-1 to once again make it to the group stage. Here we're up against Club Africain from Tunisia, Mbarara from Nigeria, and San Pedro from Ivory Coast. In our opening game, a Robert Kigundu brace helped us to a 3-2 victory at home against San Pedro. But it was David Onyango and Robert Okello on the left wing who helped us to a 4-2 victory in Nigeria against Mbarara. But we were reminded of how difficult winning the Champions League would be as Club Africain beat us 1-0 in Tunisia. Then when they came to visit us, despite our best efforts, we lost 3-2, putting us on the back foot for qualifying. Things got even worse when San Pedro then beat us 3-1 in Ivory Coast, meaning we have to beat Mbarara to stand a chance of making it to the quarterfinals. And thankfully, the boys delivered. Robert Kigundu scored himself a hat-trick in a massive 6-1 win over the Nigerians. That means, by the skin of our teeth, we make it to the quarterfinals for the first time. As a reward, we've been drawn against Mamelodi Sundowns from South Africa, and the South Africans were all over us. But we defended so well until the 78th minute when they broke the deadlock. But despite their 19 shots to our 10 and their 2.2 XG to our 1.2, we defied the odds and scored not once, but twice in the 90th minute to come back and win the first leg at home in front of our own fans. The second leg will go down as an absolute all-timer, because we scored 3 times in the first 15 minutes of the match to make it seem like the result was beyond all doubt. There's no way we're not qualifying. But between the 37th and 44th minute of the game, Sundown scored 4 goals of their own to make it 5-all on aggregate going into half-time. And with momentum swinging in their direction, surely they were going to crush us in the second half and we'd be knocked out. When the referee awarded them a penalty early in the second half, at that moment the game fell over, until our goalkeeper made a huge save which swung momentum back in our favour. Minutes later, we scored a goal from the edge of the penalty area to get ourselves back in front before we scored our 5th of the game late on to ensure we make it to the semi-finals of the CAF Champions League. We had 5 shots on target in that game and scored 5. It was an absolute robbery, but sometimes you need a bit of luck. In the semi-finals, we've been drawn against ASEC Mimosas, who we've beaten previously in the preliminary rounds. Knowing that we've beaten them before, we had plenty of confidence. And in the first leg at home, we took the lead 77 minutes in through Robert Kagundu, only to then concede 2 minutes later as Mimosas got themselves back on level terms. But just 60 seconds later, Kagundu scored a second goal for us, meaning we win the first leg 2-1. But away from home, we absolutely shone, scoring 4 goals and conceding none, meaning we win the semi-final 6-1 on aggregate, and against the odds, we're heading to the CAF Champions League final. But here we have our toughest test yet. Egypt Al Ahly, the 11-time winners of the Champions League. The final is played over 2 legs, with the first leg in Egypt. And we had the perfect start to the game as Al Ahly's Mohamed Mustafa was given a straight red card early in the second half. But as it was so early, they still set up to attack, which opened up some gaps at the back for us to exploit as Kagundu scored a goal. And we managed to get a second goal as their left back was caught between 2 players, leaving Basangwa totally unmarked to score a superb goal. Then early in the second half, Robert Okello scored what quite frankly is a world-class goal as he dribbled across the edge of the area before unleashing his shot. Robert Kagundu's pace was too much for the centre-backs and he scored our 4th goal an hour into the game before it was rounded off by Robert Okello, who scored another great goal which the keeper will be disappointed to concede. So we hold a 5-goal lead going into the second leg at home. But Al Ahly have won 11 Champions League for a reason, and if anyone can turn it around, especially with 11 men on the pitch, it's gonna be them. But if we can hold on for 90 minutes, we'll be the champions of Africa. Obviously, Al Ahly came out the block strong as they hit the post just 20 minutes in from a free kick routine. A few minutes later, they then broke through our defensive lines, but our keeper tipped the ball behind for a corner. Then, just before half-time, they looked to break down the left-hand side of the pitch and get the ball into the middle and shoot from distance, but once again our keeper made a spectacular save. At the break, we're holding them. We just have 45 minutes to go. But once again, Al Ahly were breaking through the middle, getting the ball into the penalty area, and once again our keeper made a world-class save. Then finally, it was our turn to attack, but we could only shoot from distance and put the ball over the crossbar. But with 10 minutes to go, we had a chance to build out from the back and play the ball down the far side of the pitch, working it to the byline, putting in a low cross and scoring a goal to put us ahead on the night and win the CAF Champions League final 6-0 on aggregate and complete the challenge sent to us by Sangalo. Remember, you can get your own Mbarara City FC shirt from Sangalo's website. Go check them out, linked in the description, to find your new favourite shirt and team. After that, you can have a peek into my personal life, because I took my sister to Monaco to watch Monaco versus Benfica in the Champions League, and despite not caring about football at all, she actually got quite into it. The video is available for you to watch right now by clicking the thumbnail on the screen now.